chiropractic degree from Western States. He started at Texas Chiropractic, but he earned his chiropractic degree from Western States. It was really just the beginning of his educational journey. Dr. Vasquez then attended Bastyr University and earned a naturopathic degree. It was quite evident to those that knew him that he was anything but average. He began teaching at the school. He began publishing, lecturing, and pursuing his interest in functional medicine. Dr. Vasquez then decided to go back to school once again. At the time, he was already a highly sought-after speaker and a prolific writer. He published a number of books, including several textbooks, but he wanted more, so he enrolled in school and earned his osteopathic degree. Before moving to Spain, where Dr. Vasquez lives today, he put together a functional medicine conference in Portland shortly before he left. He had over 400 healthcare professionals in attendance at that meeting. There were many great moments, but one of the moments that I remember quite vividly was when Dr. Bland, Jeff Bland, took the stage and he said, "This is where the student has surpassed the teacher." I think that was quite an honor. Today, Dr. Vasquez continues educating healthcare professionals from around the world. He reviews research and writes most every day. Dr. Vasquez joined Biotics research team, educational team. We were talking the other night. I was going to say over a decade ago, but he reminded me it's been over 14 years. And it's been a great relationship. He would come to the office, work out of the office, and he was writing, publishing, and assisting with product development. I remember when we first started publishing data about vitamin D, arguing that 400 IUs was not the ideal amount. In fact, I think that we believe today that the number was just made up out of the sky. Nobody knows where it came from, and we argued the number was probably about 10 times that. The very first piece he published on that was in a medical publication where doctors got continuing education credits for reading the article and answering some questions. And at that time, we really anticipated a lot of arrows coming into 10, at least from the establishment. And quite frankly, I think it really changed the way the world looks at vitamin D. Of course, he's published many more articles on that, some in peer review, and many people have also taken that bandwagon. Today, I don't believe there's many people in the world that believe 400 IUs is what we should be doing with vitamin D. When Dr. Vasquez was in Houston or in Rosenberg, which is where we are, we actually set up a small clinic, and we were going to start doing some clinical studies there before he went off to medical school. Alex and I got to know each other quite well, as he did with Daryl and Bill and so many others at Biotics Research. And sometimes in the evenings we would talk about our dreams and what we really wanted to achieve. And one of the things that we talked about frequently was the goal one day to have a larger format functional medicine conference, bringing world-class educators together with world-class doctors to benefit your patients. And as I look around the room, I see all of you that are investing time in your patients, and that's quite impressive, and I hope they recognize it, because we certainly do. So with the debut of the EPIC Conference on Functional Medicine, the initial phase of that goal has been achieved, and we're excited about it. And so we thank you for being here. Dr. Vasquez traveled from his home in Spain to be with us today. And so if you would all silence your phones and join me in welcoming Dr. Alex Vasquez to the EPIC stage. The last thing I'd like to say is Alex isn't just a colleague. He's a dear friend to all of us at Biotics, and I don't know how often we communicate, but it's often many times a day. So, again, thank you for being here, and Alex.
So, now I have the obligation and the opportunity to live up to all that. So, we obviously are about to talk about fibromyalgia. As most of you know, it's one of my favorite topics because it's a combination of most of my favorite topics. So we'll go through this. These are all brand new. I just made these over the last 48 hours, including this morning, starting at 5 o'clock in the morning. I made a few changes. So this is the first time anybody has seen this presentation. So obviously, if I just finished it this morning, then we haven't been able to make it available to you. We'll make something available to you. A couple of these images are copyrighted, because they're from my book. So I'd appreciate if you'd respect that and not post it on social media, because this conference is for the people who are here, right? And that's you, right? Right. So, we all want to respect the work that people do because it's their life. I've been working on this material arguably for 25 years, and I didn't get into this easily or voluntarily necessarily. I got sick. In my last year of chiropractic college in 1995. It was a Wednesday. I remember it was a Wednesday. I don't remember the exact date. I think it was in May. But I got hit, like a lot of people get hit, with some type of neuroinflammatory fatigue-related disorder. And I remember the day. It was right around the time I started doing my so-called outpatient internship at the chiropractic clinic. And I had gone through a lot of stress in the previous 2 years, and at that was it. Finally, kind of climaxed into an illness. Not too surprising, but that's how I got into this. I should say that's how I got more deeply into this. I was already studying nutrition since the time I was 16, and already into orthomolecular medicine. I was already following Jeff Bland's work. I was reading and writing. I was already publishing articles at that time, but I had to take the deep dive. So. None of us necessarily can specialize in everything, but when we have a personal reason, like our own survival, then of course we have to amp it up. So this wasn't simply studying. This isn't simply a lecture presentation. I've lived some of this. So let's talk about that. I actually grew up here in Houston. So this is the first time I've actually presented in Houston, which is a little bit of an irony, but I did grow up here. And for those of you who are visiting for the first time, I apologize on behalf of Houston, because it's a big, sprawling city. And some of you, like I was talking with a gentleman today in the elevator coming down just now. We were both looking at each other, talking about our allergies on the way down, because Houston's famous for provoking and perpetuating allergies. As Dennis said, I'm a doctor of chiropractic from Western States and a mix of Texas Chiropractic College, where I started. And I consider both of those educations to have been important. I certainly learned a lot. Actually, a lot at Texas Chiropractic College for about my first year and a half. I still remember my gross anatomy professor. I still remember some of our lectures. I remember the philosophy classes that we had, and those influence my work even now. So, 25 years later or something like that. Like Dennis said, after that I went to Bastyr for naturopathic medicine because I was totally entranced by botanical medicine. And then, again, as Dennis already said, I practiced for about 6 years in Seattle and then again here in Houston, and then decided to go to osteopathic medical school to see what it's like on the other side, so to speak. And boy, do I ever have some stories to tell. I joined the Royal Society of Medicine a couple of years, American College of Nutrition. I'm the current editor for the Journal of Orthomolecular Medicine, as well as another journal on human nutrition and functional medicine. Obviously, I've been working with biotics, like Dennis said, for 14 years. I've published about 100 articles and let's just say 25 books. One of which is Inflammation Mastery, which is almost 1,200 pages, rather small font, small margins. So it comes out to 1.5 million words, so in one book, it's the equivalent of like 20 books, plus diagrams and citations. So we'll talk about that book as we go through a little bit. Like I said, you're welcome to take a few pictures for personal use, preferably. We'll make some of these available for you. There'll be a few images that I prefer that you not take pictures of, especially if you're thinking about posting it on social media, because they're from my books. And, a lot of my ideas are original. That's why, I have, some claim to my material. I don't just repeat what other people say. I try to think of things in a new way. That's what people enjoy about my material. So, what makes it special is the fact that I work on it and develop it and mature it, and that takes a lot of time, so I appreciate not getting it secondhand on Facebook. So like I said, I've worked on this for a long time. In 1995, I got sick, and I was already into nutrition. I was already following Jeff Bland and Leo Galland and Alan Gaby and Jonathan Wright, but I had to go farther. In 2008, I started working for IFM, Institute for Functional Medicine, in 2003. I wrote their pain monograph in 2008. I also published Integrative Orthopedics in 2004. And then all that work has matured from my rheumatology textbooks, et cetera, hypertension, into my most recent book, which is Inflammation Mastery. It's my most recent big book. So everything we're going to talk about is in that book. Because the book is so large, I've pulled out certain sections, like the section on migraine and fibromyalgia. That's a separate book called Brain Inflammation, but all that information is in Inflammation Mastery. Also, as Dennis already mentioned, I've published a lot of newspaper articles, magazine articles, peer-reviewed, and some pretty top-tier journals, like British Medical Journal. In 2016, as you can see on the picture, that was Nature Reviews Rheumatology. Actually, one of my first publications was in Arthritis and Rheumatism, which is published by the American College of Rheumatology. I did that while I was still a chiropractic student. I was like, I want to show you folks what's going on. So that was my first big publication. But I've taken it, obviously, pretty far since then. And a lot of my articles are available for free online. So, in fact, virtually all of them. So you can, I've got websites, I've got a page on academia.edu, and you can get my articles and download them and do what you want. So like I said, fibromyalgia is one of my favorite topics because I could talk for 25 hours on dysbiosis because I just did it. And I've talked for 16 hours on mitochondrial, 8 hours is probably okay, mitochondrial dysfunction. And then neuroinflammation is a pretty cool topic. So we're going to talk about all these things today. And a little bit of social injustice to sprinkle into our conversation. So those are some of my favorite topics, in addition to just inflammation and autoimmunity in general. So let's talk about kind of the contents of today's presentation, which you're about to see right here. Current status, we'll talk about like what's going on in the world of fibromyalgia. Same thing that's going on with most diseases, and that is we make small progress, but we have to conclude at the end of the day that it's an idiopathic condition that requires 3 drugs for the duration of the patient's life. So we'll talk about the disease presentation and differential diagnosis. Pathophysiologic components, that's where the action is, right? For people who don't understand the disease, they can't treat the disease. So we want to understand the disease. So a lot of what I see in the research, and I could go as far as, I can go all the way with this conversation, but a lot of what I see in the research is just infomercialized drug propaganda, basically. And so we'll talk about some of that. I'll show you a few examples. And I've got other examples, believe me. And I've argued with some of the journals, so like looking at this information and writing research and getting published and all that, all of you only see the end result, right? I'm the one, just like many others, but I'm the one kind of in the trenches talking with the editors and fighting this stuff out. So I see what goes on behind the scenes, and that's an eye-opening experience. And if you knew what was going on, I'm sure some of you do, or at least you've seen glimpses. I mean, what goes on in these journals is just political disaster, right? And they have financial motivation for it, right? So we can talk about that if we have time later for a tangent. So we are going to talk about the main pathophysiologic components. I'm not keeping it a secret. This is what we're going to talk about. Dysbiosis, mitochondrial impairment, and how both of those lead to and perpetuate neuroinflammation. And then, of course, we'll talk about therapeutics more than once. So we're going to talk about dysbiosis. I don't have a lot of slides on dysbiosis. This is a pretty lean presentation, but you'll get what you need to get. And we'll talk about how to treat the dysbiosis. And then we'll talk about mitochondrial dysfunction. You'll get what you need to get. And then we'll talk about how to treat that, and the same with neuroinflammation. And then at the end, we'll review and hopefully have time for questions and answers. You'll see on the left-hand side that has kind of an index. So you'll see our progression as we go through each of these slides and each of these segments. Good research never grows old, but it does get buried under the constant avalanche of drug-funded and commercialized suicides. So some really great, like we knew more or less.
Hola, bienvenidos a esta presentación y a esta gran oportunidad de aprender de un experto internacional. El tema es fibromialgia. Aquí tenemos una presentación de este año grabada de una conferencia de medicina funcional en Houston, Texas, Estados Unidos. No tienes que viajar. Desde la comodidad de tu casa puedes disfrutar con subtítulos en español.